So two things have come out in the last 24 hours, and they both surround the Los Angeles Clippers. I want to start with an article that was very well written by The Athletic that details some of the issues that some of the Clippers players had with the treatment of them versus the treatment of their two stars, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And let me be clear. This is not the first time information has leaked out about that Los Angeles Clippers team. We've seen multiple reports of teammates throughout the season saying, I don't like how this is going. Look, I don't know who's the leak in that Clippers locker room. You could put one and one together and see who's not there anymore. And I do believe that partially could be part of the leak. I don't know if Montrezl Harrell is a leak, but I will go as far as to say, look, Montrezl was one of the guys who was vocal with the media about how he felt like the Clippers were not serious enough about the process. He said that throughout the season. When there would be games where Kawhi would play, Paul George would play, back and forth. They play together every other third night. So, I mean, on that alone, I think it's safe to say Montrezl probably doesn't have any problems talking, but I don't know if he's one of the leaks that was used in this story. So we're going to start with this story with The Athletic. I want to read to you guys a couple things that came out. Apparently, players were upset at the practice schedule. Kawhi Leonard lives in San Diego, and apparently Kawhi was late to a lot of practices. He obviously flew private, and that bothered teammates who believed that the Clippers needed practice to get to their ultimate goal, which was to win a championship. That team blew a 3-1 series lead to the Denver Nuggets. Another thing that's in this Athletic article is apparently other teammates felt like Kawhi and PG could seemingly pick and choose when they played. The Clippers knew what they were getting themselves into with Kawhi Leonard. He was a guy who had it his way in Toronto, and I still believe Kawhi regrets, deep down if you backed him in a corner, he regrets leaving Toronto. Just the structure that organization had fits him a lot better than what the Clippers gave him last year. Too much freedom, I believe. So, I think the Clippers knew what they were getting themselves into with Kawhi. I'm not so sure if they knew what they were getting themselves into with Paul George, wanting to be treated just like Kawhi. And he has the right to do that. So, another thing that came up was that both Kawhi and PG were the only players with personal security and trainers. Now, this one I'll push back a little bit and take up for Kawhi and PG. They're the two stars of the team. I guess the Paul George one can kind of get iffy because he's a guy that has not won a championship, but I would let y'all know that Paul George, I know there's the pandemic P jokes going around on the internet. All that's fine. Paul George is a hell of a basketball player. Let's not forget that. When his mind is right, when he's healthy, it ain't too many forwards that can go bucket for bucket with Paul George. I don't want to have this conversation about Kawhi Leonard. He deserves a trainer. He deserves security. He's Kawhi Leonard. Even with him being behind the scenes and not wanting to be the extrovert during interviews, Kawhi's brand is still top 6, top 7 in the league. Even with all that, with the ha-ha, the laugh and the what it do, baby? And obviously the success that he's had on the court the last few years. Still one of the top 7 brands accidentally in the NBA. Accidentally. So, he deserves security, a trainer. Ain't nothing wrong with that. A lot of guys got personal trainers. In regards to Paul George, I guess you could push back a little bit, but who's going to be doing the pushback on that Clippers team from last year? Pat Bev? Lou Will? Who? Montrezl? Like who? Marcus? he just got the bag. He should be all smiles. So I think the biggest story of this article is who's still talking in Los Angeles? Is it guys that have left that organization? Is it staff members? Who's talking within that Clippers organization? Now, I want to fast forward. Paul George was the most recent guest on Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson's All the Smoke podcast. Now, the timing of this interview is interesting to me. We're 3 weeks away from the season. I want to be fair to the players. A lot of guys are doing press right now because The offseason was short. They didn't expect to play basketball this quickly again. But, for Paul George to come out and do an interview in which, if I'm listening to him correctly, he's blaming Doc Rivers, the former head coach of the team, now the coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, for a lot of his issues. As a matter of fact, he's quoted as saying, during that whole process, we never worked on adjustments. We never worked on what to do differently. As a matter of fact, Paul George furthers that comment in his interview with All the Smoke by saying, when the Clippers got up 3-1 versus the Nuggets, I'm summarizing here, he said he felt like the team didn't make adjustments to win it. And he's not surprised that they lost. He said he thought the team just kind of felt like, we got Paul George, we got Kawhi, we got Lou, and we got Montrez. We're going to figure it out. But he felt like the team didn't make those in-series adjustments to beat the Denver Nuggets a fourth game. And, throwing Doc Rivers under the bus is cool, but I'm not the biggest fan of Tyronn Lue, the head coach, myself. What happens if the Clippers don't get to their goals this season? Because now the pressure is on. I look at it as like the guys with the most pressure to win a ring at this point are Kawhi and Paul George and Giannis. And really it's Paul George and Giannis. To me, these are the two guys with the most pressure to win a championship. And there are guys like Chris Paul that I'll throw in and other guys around the league. But that conversation for me starts with Giannis and Paul George. No two guys have more pressure to make it to the NBA Finals than those two guys. And, Giannis is a free agent to be this summer. And Paul George can opt out of his deal alongside Kawhi Leonard 2 summers from now. And I think all that is valuable because you're going to run out of guys to blame. Paul wanted out of Indiana. I get it. We go to the Thunder, though. You're with a Hall of Famer in Russ. And I'll even give him a little slack there. Russ don't know how to play with nobody. You're in Los Angeles now with a Clippers team that gave that Golden State Warriors team a run for their money. That's with Kevin Durant a year ago. 6-game first-round series. It literally took Kevin Durant being the most unbelievable version of himself that I've seen, dropping 50 and 45 in back-to-back games for the Warriors at the time to get past the Clippers. That's without Kawhi. That's without Paul George. You add Kawhi Leonard. Well, here's the thing. You can't put too much blame on Kawhi. He's a proven champion. He did it with Toronto. He did it with San Antonio. Defensive Player of the Year. Finals MVP. It's going to be tough to throw blame on him. We've seen him do it on the highest stage. Paul George, his reputation it's starting to pick up steam. This Pandemic Pete thing, man, it's funny, but it's a bad rep to have on your name. This, he was going around with the name Playoff Pete, and I'm looking around like, when he get that name? When he earn that name? So it's pivotal for Paul George to change the narrative around his name in the postseason. But for me, it starts with the regular season. Like the Milwaukee Bucks take the regular season 2 series, and I didn't think the Clippers took the regular season series enough. So we'll see what the mentality is in Los Angeles for the Clippers. Also, the Lakers are the defending champions. We'll see how much that adds to this team. I didn't think they had a great offseason, not a bad one. Like the Serge Ibaka pickup. Didn't like losing Montrez, but I get it. Other guys like Landry Shamet is no longer there, and Reggie Jackson re-signed. There are some pieces. Pat Bev's still there. We've heard the Lou Will trade rumblings. We'll see where this Clippers team's at. JaMychal Green was a big guy in that locker room. He's now in Denver. We'll see where this Clippers team's at. I'm super excited to watch them night in, night out. And I'm just happy to see Kawhi and Paul George playing basketball more. And hopefully these brothers are 100% healthy and also 100% motivated.